August 15, 1945. Emperor Hirohito's voice crackled over radio speakers across Japan, the first time most Japanese citizens had ever heard their divine emperor speak. His message was carefully worded, almost poetic in its evasion. The war situation has developed not necessarily to Japan's advantage, the greatest understatement in modern history. But here's the question historians still debate. When did Japan's leaders actually realize they had lost? Was it the moment the atomic bombs fell, the Soviet invasion of Manchuria? Or had they known much, much earlier and simply refused to accept it? Today, we're diving into one of World War II's most fascinating psychological questions. The moment Japan understood the war was unwinnable. Because unlike Germany's sudden collapse, Japan's realization came in waves, each more devastating than the last. And understanding when they knew reveals a tragic story of pride, denial, and the terrible human cost of refusing to surrender. Let's start at the beginning, or rather, at the beginning of the end. June 4th to 7th, 1942. The Battle of Midway. Japan's Admiral Yamamoto, the brilliant architect of Pearl Harbor, gambled everything on destroying the American carrier fleet. He failed catastrophically. In 4 minutes of American dive bomber attacks, Japan lost 4 fleet carriers: Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, and Hiryu. These weren't just ships, they represented the core of Japan's naval air power. Worse, Japan lost 248 aircraft, and critically, many of her most experienced pilots. Here's what most people don't know. Japan's military leadership understood immediately how devastating this defeat was. Commander Mitsuo Fuchida, who led the Pearl Harbor attack and survived Midway, later wrote, "At that instant, I knew Japan had lost the war. We could not replace those carriers, those pilots, for years. The Americans could replace theirs in months." Vice Admiral Chuichi Nagumo reportedly said to his staff, "I have destroyed Japanese naval aviation." But here's the critical part. They didn't tell anyone. Not the Japanese public, not even most of their own military. Newspapers proclaimed Midway a victory. The truth was classified at the highest levels. Admiral Yamamoto himself confided to his staff, "I can run wild for 6 months, maybe a year. After that, I have no expectation of success." He'd said this before Pearl Harbor. After Midway, his prediction was coming true, but Yamamoto and Japan's military leaders faced an impossible dilemma. How could they admit defeat when their entire philosophy was built on the idea that Japanese spirit could overcome any material disadvantage? The first crack had appeared, but the edifice of denial held firm. By 1943, some Japanese leaders began confronting brutal mathematics. Let me show you the production numbers that haunted Tokyo's war planners. Aircraft production, 1943. United States, 85,898 aircraft. Japan, 16,693 aircraft. That's a 5-to-1 ratio. But it gets worse. Naval tonnage produced, 1943. United States, 2.65 million tons. Japan, 769,000 tons. Japan was building ships as fast as it could. America was building them more than 3 times faster. And unlike Japan, America wasn't being bombed, blockaded, or starved of resources. Admiral Osamu Nagano, Chief of Naval General Staff, presented these figures to Emperor Hirohito in late 1943. His assessment was clinical and devastating. "Your Majesty, we are consuming our naval air power faster than we can replace it. The Americans are expanding theirs exponentially. By mid-1944, they will have numerical superiority in every category." Prime Minister Hideki Tojo received similar reports. Minister of Munitions Nobusuke Kishi, later to become Prime Minister himself in the 1950s, warned that Japan's economy couldn't sustain the war beyond 1945, even under the best circumstances. But here's where Japanese political culture created a deadly trap. To admit the war was unwinnable meant admitting that hundreds of thousands had died in vain, losing face before the emperor and the nation, potential assassination by military hardliners, the collapse of the entire government. So they said nothing. Plans were made for one decisive battle that would force America to negotiate. First, it would be in the Central Pacific. then the Philippines, then Okinawa, then the home islands themselves. The goal kept shifting, but the delusion remained constant. One great victory would change everything. It wouldn't, and deep down, more and more Japanese leaders knew it. October 23rd to 26th, 1944. The Battle of Leyte Gulf, the largest naval battle in history. Japan threw everything it had left into stopping the American invasion of the Philippines. Admiral Takeo Kurita commanded Japan's main striking force, the super battleships Yamato and Musashi, plus cruisers and destroyers. His mission was simple: break through to Leyte Gulf and destroy the American landing forces. For a brief moment on October 25th, it looked like it might work. Kurita's force surprised and devastated an American escort carrier group. American ships were sinking. Panic spread through American radio channels. Then, Kurita turned around and retreated. Historians still debate why. Was he confused? Overestimated American strength? Suffered a breakdown? Whatever the reason, he withdrew at the moment of potential victory. But it didn't matter, because while Kurita retreated, 3 other Japanese task forces were being systematically destroyed. The Americans sank. 4 aircraft carriers, 3 battleships, 10 cruisers, 13 destroyers. Japan had committed nearly every operational warship it possessed. Most never returned. Vice Admiral Takejiro Onishi, commander of Japan's First Air Fleet, wrote in his diary, "The combined fleet has ceased to exist as a fighting force. We can no longer stop the enemy's advance through conventional means." This admission led directly to his next decision: the formal organization of kamikaze attacks. Suicide missions weren't a sign of strength. They were an admission that Japan had run out of options. Admiral Somu Toyoda, commander of the combined fleet, reportedly told his staff after Leyte Gulf, "We have lost the war. Now we fight only to make the enemy's victory as costly as possible, in hope they will offer acceptable peace terms." Think about that. Japan's top naval commander knew the war was lost in October 1944. But the kamikazes, the desperate defense of Okinawa, the refusal to surrender even after atomic bombs, all of that came after this realization. They knew, and they kept fighting anyway. March 9th to 10th, 1945, Operation Meeting House, 334 American B-29 bombers dropped 1,665 tons of incendiary bombs on Tokyo. The firestorm killed approximately 100,000 people in a single night, more than either atomic bomb would kill initially. 16 square miles of Tokyo burned to ash. A Japanese fire warden described it. The flames created their own wind. People were sucked into the fire. The canals boiled. There was nowhere to hide. And this was just one raid. Over the next 5 months, American bombers systematically burned Japan's cities. Osaka, Nagoya, Kobe, Yokohama, one after another, Japan's urban centers turned to cinders. By July 1945, Japan's situation was Navy, effectively destroyed Air Force, reduced to hoarding planes for kamikaze attacks, Army, 2 million troops in China but cut off from the home island's economy, industrial production down 60% from 1944, food, rations cut to near starvation levels, imports, American submarines had strangled maritime traffic, 90% of Japan's merchant fleet was at the bottom of the ocean. The Supreme War Council, 6 men who effectively ran Japan, met repeatedly in the summer of 1945. The meetings were agonizing. Foreign Minister Shigenori Togo argued, "We must surrender now, while the emperor still has authority to make such a decision accepted." War Minister Korechika Anami countered, "If we surrender unconditionally, the emperor system will be destroyed. We must fight for better terms." Here's the thing. They all knew Japan had lost. The debate wasn't whether to continue fighting to win. That was impossible. The debate was whether losing slowly might get better surrender terms than losing quickly. This is crucial to understanding what happened next. The atomic bombs didn't tell Japan's leaders something they didn't know. The bombs changed the political calculation about what kind of surrender was acceptable. Prime Minister Kantaro Suzuki later admitted, "We knew we had lost by spring 1945, but we couldn't agree on how to lose." August 6, 1945. Hiroshima, a single bomb. 70,000 dead instantly. The Supreme War Council met. War Minister Anami's response was chilling. This changes nothing. We expected American attacks to intensify. August 9, 1945. Two things happened. First, at 11:02 a.m., a second atomic bomb destroyed Nagasaki. Second, and arguably more important, at midnight on August 9th, the Soviet Union declared war on Japan and invaded Manchuria with 1.5 million troops. This was the real breaking point. Here's why. Japan's military had been planning for Ketsu-go, the decisive battle for the home islands against an American invasion. It was suicidal, but they believed Japanese spirit might extract such a high cost that America would negotiate rather than occupy Japan. But the Soviet invasion destroyed this strategy completely. Now Japan faced American invasion from the Pacific, Soviet invasion from the north, no hope of negotiated peace with Soviets as intermediaries, likelihood of Soviet occupation of northern Japan, potential communist revolution August 9th to 10th, overnight. The Supreme War Council met in the Emperor's bomb shelter. They were deadlocked 3-3. Those voting to surrender immediately: Foreign Minister Togo Navy, Minister Yonai, Prime Minister Suzuki. Those voting to fight on: War Minister Anami Army, Chief of Staff Umezu Navy, Chief of Staff Toyoda. For the first time in modern Japanese history, the Emperor broke the tie. Hirohito spoke. "I cannot bear to see my innocent people suffer any longer. The time has come to bear the unbearable." Even then, it wasn't over. Military hardliners attempted a coup on August 14th to 15th, trying to prevent the surrender broadcast. They failed. The Emperor's recording was played. The war was over. So when did Japan know it had lost? The honest answer: gradually, painfully, and at different times for different leaders. Admiral Yamamoto knew after Midway, June 1942. Economic planners knew by late 1943, when the production numbers became undeniable. Naval commanders knew after Leyte Gulf, October 1944. The Supreme War Council knew by spring 1945. But accepting that knowledge, making peace with defeat, surrendering, that took until August 15th, 1945. Why did it take so long? The answer reveals something tragic about war itself. The same factors that made Japan fight so fanatically: cultural values of honor, fear of shame, belief in spiritual strength over material weakness, loyalty to the emperor, made it nearly impossible to surrender until the alternative was literally extinction. Foreign Minister Togo wrote in his memoirs, "We knew we had lost, but knowing and accepting are different things. Every day we delayed cost lives, Japanese and Allied. I carry that burden still." War Minister Anami committed ritual suicide on August 15th, rather than live with surrender. His final words: "I apologize for the defeat." The lesson isn't about weakness or strength. It's about the terrible human cost when leaders know the truth but can't act on it. When pride, culture, and politics prevent rational decisions. Japan didn't lose because they didn't know. They lost because they couldn't or wouldn't accept what they knew,